Yes. Hey there, welcome back to True North Reviews. My name is Ryan, and today we are reviewing the new record from Coldplay, Everyday Life. This is the 8th studio album, a double LP from the British rock band, headed up by frontman Chris Martin, lead vocalist, pianist, Mr. Melody Man. The dude has written some of my favorite melodies I've heard in my lifetime. Coldplay, let's be honest, they haven't been as relevant in the past 10 years compared to when they dominated the airwaves in the 2000s with their brand of Britpop. That's despite even having a Super Bowl performance and being nominated for numerous Grammy Awards in the 2010s, but the success of the band has kind of dwindled over the past couple albums. For sure, they still have a loyal fan base, I myself included. It's just hard to live up to the high standards from your first few records, especially when they are the caliber of Coldplay. While many fans pass off their later releases of Milo Xyloto, Ghost Stories, and A Head Full of Dreams, I don't think this band has ever had a misstep in their discography or a moment in time where they lost touch with their songwriting ability. It's just that with their most recent record, they were on the verge of repeating themselves with bland pop songs, and I think this progression towards Everyday Life is not only a welcomed return, but also a breath of fresh air that quite possibly could rejuvenate the career of Coldplay. On one hand, many of the songs on Everyday Life have been stripped back to the foundational core of raw and emotional performances, while on the other hand, Coldplay are still very much anthemic. We can't mention their name without thinking of anthems. And with that, many of the larger-than-life sounds that Coldplay have woven into their music over the years, those sounds do really lend themselves well to be accompanied with their universal messages of love, pain, and loss, all the things that make us human. Which makes all the more sense for them to discuss these themes even further on their latest record with a lens of 2019 in mind, because we are in a world of social and political issues with the climate crisis, police brutality, and gun control. It's also within the past couple weeks lead up to Everyday Life that Coldplay announced that they would not be touring with this record as a means to cut down on their carbon emissions. Regardless of your view on that decision, there seems to be a heightened sense of social awareness from Coldplay. They no longer seem to be patronizing their listeners. I think they're truly there to comfort them while also shedding some frustration. It was with the co-lead single Arabesque that Coldplay was starting to voice their frustrations as they were handed their first parental warning for dropping multiple F-bombs. Arabesque as a song, though, it's easily my favorite track on this album. It has a hypnotic and groovy bass line. It features worldly social commentary, as we even have multiple languages with a contribution from the French pop star Stromae. More than that, musically, the crescendo at the end of this song is one of the most momentous and cathartic listening experiences that I've had all year. Another critical moment on this album comes with another crescendo on the track Trouble in Town, a cut that has euphoric synthesizers that sound like a train is shooting by before drums crash onto the scene. I wouldn't expect any less excitement from Coldplay, given that they've written the mammoth and whirlwind of emotions that come on Fix You. Again, focusing on Everyday Life, it's Coldplay's ability to toe the line between sonically interesting passages while throwing in socially relevant lyrics that root themselves in society that make this all the more compelling to listen to. Chris Martin is very socially aware when he pens the messages of racial profiling on Trouble in Town or the opening track on the second side of this LP, Guns. Another one of my favorites for its highway romp and energetic strums of guitar, so instantly catchy yet so gritty, bare, and forthright. It's on another song, Wonder of the World, Power of the People, that we hear this rough around the edge, raw kind of recording style. I definitely appreciate it, even though we do hear some slip-ups in Chris Martin's technical ability of playing guitar. For Everyday Life, it's simply going to be an album that is staying true to what Everyday Life is about. It's not always about perfection. Hence why this record consumes most of its runtime with subdued and soft compositions. Think of a track like When I Need a Friend, which is a gospel-tinged track where we hear these harmonies that fill the halls of a cathedral. I imagine Coldplay is seeking out a different place to record instead of the standard studio with this track, because the vocal harmonies on When I Need a Friend are just so gorgeous and so natural sounding. I don't think a studio could recreate this sound. Coldplay really did outdo themselves, and it sounds like they were branching out to find a different place to record. Now, of course, when we're talking about branching out, this is an album that is pretty experimental for Coldplay. They aren't reinventing the wheel or anything when they do dabble in different genres. Gospel, for example, but they still try it out. And I have to say, they do it even better than Kanye West did earlier this year. So that's saying something. I never thought Coldplay could pull it off, but they have a track on here called Broken that is such a gospel-leaning track. It has this stripped-back composition to it, a very rustic bass drum, finger snaps, and a raw vocal performance from Chris Martin. The eclectic inspiration of this record is pushed even further on the front half of this LP with the opening track, Sunrise. It's one that has gorgeous string arrangements from David Rossi. Cry 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 is also a weird song for Coldplay. It sticks out with its falsetto that sounds like an alien child in space. It sounds like they're getting a lot of influence from Han on this one, with a bit of a gospel tinge as well. Of course, with many experiments under their belt on this record, you don't want to isolate a lot of your old fans, and I think Coldplay does a fairly decent enough job to keep their old fans happy. Daddy is a piano ballad that will remind many old fans of the piano playing that Chris Martin has done over the years, even into the later discography with Ghost Stories. The cut Echo is also pretty weird for Coldplay, but it's still rooted in Milo Xyloto era of piano and guitar. It's very quiet and serene with its arrangements. Now, when we talk about Milo Xyloto, I can't help but to feel underwhelmed by that album's final leg of tracks, but to redeem themselves, I think Coldplay have strung together some of their strongest and most entertaining songs to end a record, at least for what I've heard in quite some time. For starters, Old Friends is a fantastic track. We have some of the best guitar playing on the project, so tranquil and poignant, and we have this descending chord outro, which just seals this track very nicely. From then on, we move on to Children of Adam, which is a classically inspired piano interlude. It bridges the final part of this record together. We move into the anthemic territory of Coldplay one last time with Champion of the World. The vocal harmonies on this from the group are dazzling, and this track really does sound like an underdog anthem from this record. And then, of course, we close on the title track, Everyday Life, which summarizes and closes out this album lyrically, asking if the listener wants to be a part of the future or will they remain part of the past. And for Coldplay, they are always so close to making their songs sound really preachy and just a little hard to believe. The title track was almost one of those after the first listen, but once I gave it a few more tries, that was when I started to empathize with the track a lot, which is something I do a lot with Coldplay. Overall, for Everyday Life, I think this is a record that is orchestral, as the artwork would suggest. It's also classically driven for its music. I really appreciate the multiple languages that are thrown on this record. I feel like it emphasizes and enforces the connection that Chris Martin is trying to have with the entire world. Obviously doing justice without being too preachy. I feel like this record is quite emotional, grounded, adventurous, and it's really showing a lot of heart on the sleeve kind of stuff while being resilient. What impresses me more with this record, though, is how both sides of the album are fairly strong. Disc 1 is certainly the more experimental and the one that has a bit more of a deep cut approach to it. Disc 2 is the accessible and pop friendly side of the album. It's really what we've come to know and love from Coldplay over the years. But yeah, this is also a record that is noticeably rougher around the edges. My one gripe with the previous Coldplay album was how sterile and clean everything sounded, so I'm glad that Everyday Life took the time to explore the more raw recording style with tracks like Guns and Wonder of the World, Power of the People. The bottom line is I feel like Everyday Life will be praised by a lot of critics. I think they will gobble it up. They will be enamored by it. This will most likely be considered Coldplay's greatest work of the 2010s. For me, already being a fan, I didn't really think their last couple records were that bad. I've never really thought that Coldplay has a bad record to their name, so take that with a grain of salt. I think this is a damn great record. There are only a couple spots that I feel like the pacing drags a little bit and the melancholic mood takes over a little too much. Either way, I enjoy this record quite a bit, and as biased as I am, I'm still feeling an 8 out of 10. There you have it. There's the review of the new Coldplay record. Sound off down below in the comments. Let me know what you think of this music. Do you agree or disagree? Is it one of Coldplay's better records this decade? Or does Chris Martin's singing still bother you? Leave a like, subscribe if you're new in town. Thanks for watching, and as always, have a rockin' day.